Alright, so a little disclaimer before I start talking here. I'm not actually talking about Stoicism as a philosophy. Rather, I'm going to be talking about the idea of Stoicism as it's understood and used colloquially. So, when you say the word Stoic in 2021, what exactly does that mean? Well, to summarize, I think it would just be this idea of indifference in the face of hardship. So that's the kind of definition I'm going to be using going forward. And while it might be slightly confusing that I'm using a picture of Marcus Aurelius, but you guys are going to get the idea. Second disclaimer, I don't really know all that much about Stoicism besides reading Marcus Aurelius when I was much younger. So as far as a complex, fleshed out philosophy, I don't know all that much. So I'm sure somebody else will chime in with plenty of things that Stoicism does do right. But as far as this word Stoic and what it means to be indifferent in the face of hardship, I think that this is something that has become very dangerous in the modern day. So I used to live my life by a very Stoic principle. And I guess I would say I still do, but that principle was don't bother yourself with the things that you can't change. So that means if something is within your power to change, then you should get upset about it. You should go make an effort to change it, or if you're not going to take the effort to change it, then stop worrying about it. Whereas if something is outside your power to change, then naturally you should not get upset about it. And I think my always go-to example of this was the type of person who gets angry at retail workers. You show up to the store and they tell you that the item that you're looking for is out of stock. And I thought it was a textbook example of a low IQ individual that they are going to look the retail worker in the eye and start screaming at them as if this is somehow their fault that they're out of stock of this particular retail item. And that's an example of a situation that is 100% outside of your control. So why exactly are you getting upset about it? Whereas something like getting upset about missing a flight, well, that situation was totally in your control. So you should have gotten upset about it, and you should have showed up to the flight earlier, right? So I often tell people that this is a valid principle to live by, but the more and more I think about it, the more I think we're running into the kind of problem that we need to understand what exactly is inside and outside of our control. And I think that people are very much quick to believe that things are outside their control when they are in fact not. And so I revisit my idea of this retail worker. And you do see these people that get angry at retail workers, but at the end of the day, perhaps they are achieving better service. Maybe they are keeping retail workers on their toes. Maybe these clerks at various companies are actually kept in check by the people that are willing to make a fuss. The people are willing to get upset about certain things. And the more I think about it, I think men in general think it's very good to be reserved, whereas in some cases, to be effective, you need to not be reserved. And if you think about some of the most effective men in history, some of the greatest leaders, some of the greatest minds, were these 100% stoic people in the sense where they totally emotionless, which is another sort of bastardization of what this word stoic means. We think that we are not allowed to react to anything. We are not allowed to show emotion at anything. Whereas, let's just think of some of the most influential people in history. Jesus, he was quite an emotional person. He was not very stoic. He often wept. He often got angry. Great leader. Let's think of any of the great leaders of the 20th century. Your Stalins, your Hitlers, your Churchills, your FDRs. These were all very emotional men, and you can look up all of these people giving very impassioned speeches. So to be effective, there is a certain amount of emotion that goes into that, and thinking that Stoicism means to be purely emotionless and not allowed to get angry at anything, that's a pretty dangerous way of thinking, because emotions can be very powerful, and anger specifically as an emotion can be extremely effective towards certain ends. And this comes back to this idea of what exactly is outside of our control. So now, is this retail scenario entirely outside of our control? Maybe if you scream at that retail worker, they'll actually check in back a little bit harder and realize that they actually did have your item in stock. Okay, now this isn't my endorsement to go and start screaming at retail workers. Rather, just an idea to reevaluate something that I thought was a truth. So now in society as a whole, many people are going to put their hands up and say, all of these things are outside of my control, so why is it worth bothering myself with them? Well, because at a certain point you do need to take agency of your own life. And even if you don't feel like you immediately do have control, you need to wrestle back some agency, some ability to manipulate your environment, right? And now it's one thing to be totally emotionless and totally stoic and totally firm, unfazed in the face of hardship, right? And that means a lot when hardship is bad weather or hardship is, maybe we have to ration food during wartime. What about when that hardship is, the government breaking down the door to send your kid to get tranny hormones? Are you going to say, well, that's out of my control. I can't affect this situation at all. And some people very much would. They would allow this to happen and say, well, nothing I can do about it, outside my control. Well, these things are very much inside your control. You do have the ability to influence the outcomes of these things. You have the ability to influence the outcome of society as a whole. So if you're going to sit there and act perfectly stoic and say, this doesn't faze me, this is perfectly earthly, I'm not going to be emotional in this certain scenario, I'm going to remain totally steadfast, I'm going to be unmoved in this time of hardship. Well, this isn't exactly hardship in the sense of something done by providence. This is hardship that has been man-made, something that has been generated. And because it is man-made hardship, it can be fixed by the means of man. So we need to stop falling for this total stoic, emotionless meme and start to get emotional. We need to start to get angry. We need to let our anger be known. You need to start showing the frustration you have with the way that things are going, and start doing whatever is in your power to influence the outcomes of these things. And I don't take this the wrong way. I'm not endorsing violence or anything like that. I'm saying emotion, right? Show some emotion, show some passion, and reveal to people how this is making you feel and how this is disturbing you to your core, and say what you want to have done about it. Because once again, these things are not outside of your control. You can influence the outcome, and to be totally emotionless in the face of things like this is not what it means to be stoic.